What up, Wizards? It's Dev, zooming in for my favorite video of each preview season. Apologies for the ongoing laryngitis situation, but I am not going to let that stop me because I am excited. This is usually the part of the video where I'd have to be like, man, this set is so overhyped that it was really hard for me to find underrated cards, but not so with Aetherdrift. A lot of people just outright hate this set, more are indifferent to it, and I've even seen some people saying that they're stepping away from this set. Maybe we'll come back for Tarkir, but I think that's a bit of a mistake. There are plenty of cards from this set, no matter how you feel about the theme, that are very powerful and are not getting enough attention. So today, let's talk about 10 cards from Aetherdrift that you really need to be aware of and nobody else is talking about. Top 10 Aetherdrift Sleepers, baby. Start your engines. And I'm your favorite Magic Channel's favorite Magic Channel. Best believe that the professor go bananas for my deck tech. And we're back. Make sure you hit the thumbs up button. It's the one shaped like a thumb. They made it pretty easy to find. You can also check out the Patreon if you want to spruce things up around here. But that's all I'm going to say for now. Let's go ahead and get to the list, because I got a lot to talk about, man. We're going to start with the honorable mention as usual. Only this time I don't have 5. I've really only got one that I want to talk about, and it's Detention Chariot. At first, this doesn't really look like much, right? Normal Magic card. 6 mana, 6/6, crew 3. My grandfather's Cadillac is more exciting than that. But dig a little bit deeper, you get up under the hood, and suddenly you see that this has a sweet enter the battlefield trigger where it exiles an artifact or a creature until it leaves the battlefield. Nothing we haven't seen before, but solid ability. And then you get over to the trunk here, and you see that it cycles for just a single white mana. There's a lot of options on this bad boy, and all power options as well. Are you digging these car dealership jokes? I'm not too sure, but one way or the other, this can cycle itself into your yard for a single mana, draw you a fresh card, and then you just reanimate it later through whatever means you want to, and you get a great into the battlefield trigger. Altogether, there's a reason this is the honorable mention, right? It's not like we haven't seen huge dudes that cycle in like every set for the last couple of years. We keep seeing like land cycling dudes that are relatively big, and you could argue that those are good reanimator targets too, but I think this is slightly a cut above most of those cards that we've seen because of that amazing into the battlefield trigger. And unlike other creatures with this kind of ability, it's virtually sorcery speed removal proof. That means it's mostly sweeper proof too, and I think that goes a long way towards making sure you keep whatever you tucked underneath this. Like altogether, there's a lot to this thing that I like, but again, it's just the honorable mention. So let's move on to a card I have even more to say about somehow. It's number 10, Boommobile.
We like the cars that go boom.
Now, Boommobile does look pretty silly. I'll give you that. It's 4 mana in red for a 5/5 with crew 2. But when it comes into play, you get 4 whole mana, but you can only use that mana to spend on activated abilities. Apart from that, though, it handily has an activated ability. You pump X and 2 and a red into it. It's going to deal X damage to any target, and it gets a +1/+1 counter, but that's an exhaust ability, so you can only do it once. Now, there is some talk of this card, but almost none of that talk takes the card seriously, despite the fact that it's a massive combo factory in standard, commander, and everything in between. Matter of fact, commander's really easy. A lot of people are talking about this with Deadeye Navigator, even though you have to have a way to have Boommobile be a creature whenever it comes into play so that it can soul bond to the Navigator, and then they blink each other out and you keep getting mana from Boommobile. It's hilarious, but apart from that, the whole time you'll be getting like Impact Trimmers stuff or Soul Warden triggers or whatever you're doing, Beast Whisperer drawing your cards. I don't know what you're into, but apart from that, there's also Cogwork Assembler and Panharmonicon together with this, effectively make it so that you'll get 8 mana when the Boommobile comes into play, thanks to Panharmonicon. You can use 7 of that mana to pump it into the Cogwork Assembler and make another copy of your Boommobile. Yeah, it's ridiculous because you'll have an extra mana every time you'll do that. And you'll also have an extra Boommobile every time you do that. But at the end of the day, you'll be able to just blow everybody off the table with an infinite fireball, because that is the secret of Boommobile. Not only is this the kind of combo piece that allows you to do broken stuff with activated ability triggers and whatnot, but it also gives itself a mana sink. A lot of times these combo pieces need some sort of mana sink to finish the game off after they generate infinite mana. This just gives you that, which a lot of these kind of cards don't get. That's all well and good, but I'm actually not done talking about infinite combos yet. Let's go to standard. That's right, standard for an infinite Boommobile interaction. All you got to do is play Lily Splash Mentor. You know what that card is? Probably not. That's why I put cards on screen for you some of the time. This is a pretty forgotten uncommon from Bloomborough, but you pump 3 mana into it and you can exile a creature you control, turn it to the battlefield under your control. That's called blinking, usually. We also can call it flickering, but either way, you take your Boommobile, you get your mana, you pump that into Lily Splash Mentor, and you find a way to make your Boommobile into a creature. That way, Lily Splash Mentor can blink the Boommobile. Comes back into play, gives you 4 more mana, funnel that into Lily Splash Mentor again, blink your Boommobile, alternate green and blue mana to do this infinitely. And there's plenty of ways to do it, right? Colodin can make sure that your Boommobile is always a creature when it comes into play, so you can target it with Lily Splash Mentor. Or maybe the better way, because it involves fewer colors and gets you a buttload of creatures in the meantime, is Simulacrum Synthesizer. Basically, you'll be blinking your Boommobile with Lily Splash Mentor. When it comes into play, you'll get a token off of Simulacrum Synthesizer, which can crew the Boommobile, turning it into a creature, funnel the mana into Lily Splash Mentor, and blink the Boommobile. Do this over and over, and every single time you'll get a construct that is increasingly larger that can crew your Boommobile. So there's a few ways to do this in Standard, and even though it's a at least 3-card combo, sometimes involves like 4 different colors, I still think it could be a really fun deck to build with actually a fair amount of inevitability if you can actually get the combo pieces out. But let's get to the number 9 card here. It's Winter Cursed Rider. I have been really surprised at the crickets this card is receiving so far. First of all, just kind of a really cool commander for Dimir artifacts. And I do want to bring up commander playability because I like to play commander. But apart from that, in Standard, it's a pretty decently costed, 2 mana, 3/2 here, with a ward ability that also gives all your artifacts a ward ability. So we're kind of already above rate here. Or below rate? I always forget which one is right. The good one. Either way, this also has an exhaust ability that does cost a good amount of mana, but still, note how it's worded. It does not hit itself with its own ability. It says each other non-artifact creature, so it never hits itself with its own sweeper. And it doesn't hit your artifact creatures either. So this could very easily be a one-sided Wrath for, in some ways, only 4 mana. Again, that looks like a pretty steep ability, but when you're talking about a one-sided Wrath, 4 mana is cheap. And there are a number of really good artifact creatures in just this set that this works with. Obviously, we got a bunch of vehicles, but there's Demonic Junker. There's another card that we're going to see a little bit later on in this video that I think this is going to go really well in a deck with. So just remember that Winter exists, not just for your commander decks. And again, a pretty cool looking commander, but in Standard, this is a pretty efficiently costed little dude that is amazing in your artifacts decks. And he protects all your other artifacts too. It's great. But let's move on to number 8, which is Thopter Fabricator over here. This is exactly the kind of card that people really like to talk about, which is telling me that nobody's really paying much attention to this set outside of like the most hype cards, you know what I mean? Because usually people would be talking about this little guy. He's no Monastery Mentor or anything, but I do think he's in most ways a buffed up Mischievous Mystic, and people love that card. So again, just like Winter, really surprised at how little noise is being made for this thing. And also, just like Winter, pretty impressive commander card, if you ask me. But apart from that, even in 1v1s, this kind of has a lot going for it. This is not the first time you'll hear me say this today, but this creature is nigh unkillable by a lot of the removal in Standard right now. It's a vehicle, so it doesn't die to lay down arms or other white like sorcery speed, even sweeper effects. Get Lost does kill it, but that's one of the only things in white that people actually play that kill it. As far as black, you are not killing this card. People play Nowhere to Run and Virtue of Persistence. The toughness is above that. Can't be cut down, obviously, and it can't be Go for the Throated. The only thing it can really be done about, that's not even English. The only thing that can really be done about it in black is like Anoint with Affliction, and fewer people are playing that card as fewer people play Abhorrent Oculus. It's also out of the range of Torch the Tower and like other bolt effects and stuff. Again, this thing isn't unkillable, but it is really close to unkillable given the suite of removal that we have in Standard that people are actually playing. But apart from that, just the text box on this thing, which again is basically Mischievous Mystic, if you don't know what that is. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, you get a 1/1 Thopter, in this case, creature token, which is pretty sweet. That also can't be Go for the Throated because it's an artifact creature. But apart from that, this is a 4/4 that crews for 2. I guess the downside there is that you have to make 2 tokens if you want the tokens to crew it, but honestly, pretty good on curve with a Mischievous Mystic because Mystic can crew it. That's kind of nice, but I don't know. There's a lot that I like about this. It's a really beefy Mischievous Mystic. It is a 3 mana 4/4 flyer. Is that not enough? Well, if it's not enough, it also spits out little flyers every twice a turn cycle if you can pull it off. So again, maybe we should be talking about this thing. Fab indeed. It certainly is. But let's move on to number 7 here, which is Summit the Driving Force. I sound like a broken record here, but what an awesome looking commander this is to brew around. But in Standard, even with the 6 mana price tag, I actually think there's a secret mode on this card which says that you get to play your spells for free. See, in case you haven't seen this card yet, it looks like it probably should have been a commander. If we'd have gotten the requisite 4 or 5 commanders that we usually get instead of just the 2 decks, then I feel like this would have been one of them. But instead, we get it in the standard product, and I kind of like that. And this is 6 mana, which is the biggest problem with the card. And it's in Naya colors. You get a 4/5 legendary, First Strike, Vigilance, Haste. That's an awful lot. With Start Your Engines. So the rest of this card looks really interesting in that context, right? First of all, this first line of text is all of your other dudes get +X+0, X being your speed. And the more interesting line of text, in my opinion at least, is the last one. Non-creature spells that you cast cost X less to cast, X being your speed. Now, that means that if you have max speed, you can cast 4-drop colorless spells for absolutely free. But even before max speed, the ability to just drop 3-drop or 2-drop artifacts at literally no expense to you is a really, really sweet deal. Not to mention that she can give your dudes +4/+0, but again, even if you have a couple of speed, all your other creatures get +2/+0 is a very powerful line of text, especially given that she can attack the turn she comes into play with First Strike, by the way. Also works like sneakily well with vehicles, right? Because a lot of vehicles are artifacts. That means they'll be a lot cheaper to cast if you have a salmon out. But when you crew those vehicles, they become creatures, so they benefit from her first ability. I kind of like the way it works with vehicles is what I'm saying. But I also like casting free 4 mana artifacts and like 1 mana Might Stone, Weak Stones. Like, oh, that seems pretty cool to me. Now we're at number 6, and I think I'm going to make the deepest cut in the entire video because we're going to talk about Burner Rocket for this entry here. In case you don't know what this is, and you probably don't, it's 2 mana, 1 and a red for a 3/1 vehicle with flash, and it crews for just 1. But here's the good part. When it enters, a creature you control gets +2/+0 and gains trample until end of turn. That's actually not a terrible pump spell, especially given the trample. I kind of like that. You can flash this in for just a couple of mana, and it works really well with Valiant on all your mice, right? Because it is an ability targeting one of your mice. So if Valiant hasn't gone off yet that turn, suddenly your Emberheart Challenger gets a counter, or your Heartfire Hero gets a counter, or whatever it is. Not only that, it's a pump spell that just sticks around. Like, I know Monster's Rage is just a better card than this by all accounts, but if you're looking for other pump spells in your deck, and usually you are trying to round that deck out with some more pump spells, this is one that leaves behind a creature, and it's super duper easy to crew this if need be. It seems okay to me. You can really blow people out if you decide to block, and I know you never do, but just give it a shot once in a while. You'd be surprised how effective it can be. But on offense, where you're supposed to play this, I actually think it's a lot more than meets the eye. I'd rock it, at least a couple of copies, but let's move on to number 5. We're halfway down the list, and we're going to look at one of my favorite cards in the entire set. It's Sky Serpent Seeker. This is just 2 mana in Simic colors for a 1/1 flying death touch. We're kind of there already, baby. But apart from that, you can pay 4 mana of any color and exhaust this to look at the cards from the top of your library till you hit 2 lands. Any old lands, not basics, not just any 2 lands that you hit, you're going to throw those onto the table tapped, and then you're going to put a +1/+1 counter on Sky Seeker Serpent. The other cards go in the bottom of your library in a random order, it doesn't matter, but one way or the other, what we're looking at here is kind of a Baleful Strix-ish type thing, right? A 2 mana flying death touch guy that gets in everyone's way, and that's awesome. But apart from that, you can exhaust it at instant speed, mind you, and go, Explosive Vegetation or Invasion of Zendikar. But it's actually better than those cards for the most part because, Explosive Vegetation effects usually just go get 2 basics. This can get, a Surveil land or a Life Gain land or a Scry land or whatever. And that's kind of unbelievable. I mean, in most cases, we are perfectly fine paying 4 mana for a version of this effect that tends to be weaker and that we have to do at sorcery speed. This can be done at instant speed. I'll reiterate that. I'm just kind of boggled by that. You can block with it and then use the ability. That's nutso, but again, usually it's going to turn out being a better ability. And in the meantime, the between time, you get a flying death touch dude that holds off your opponent's entire team, which is exactly what a ramp deck wants. But let's go ahead and move on to number 4 because I will talk about that snake all day. And I can't afford to do that. You want to see the next card. Have you already scrubbed through to this part? Hi, here's a card on screen so that you know when to stop scrubbing. It's Magmakin Artillerist over here. This is 3 mana. It's 2 and a red. For a 1/4 Elemental Pirate, those are fun creature types, but the cool line of text on this is that whenever you discard 1 or more cards, this guy deals that much damage to each opponent. That's pretty slick, but you can also cycle this away for 2 mana, and when you do, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So I guess 2 mana, draw a card at instant speed, and ping the opponent, whatever. I mean, it's better than Touch of Death for Ice Age, and I love that card, mostly because the art. God, that art. But still, this doesn't have that. Nothing has as cool of art as Touch of Death, at least to 12-year-old dev, but still, Magmakin Artillerist is a pretty sweet card, just in like Pioneer Zenith Flare. This is another copy of Drannith Stinger if you really want one, but obviously it's got more to do than that. It's ridiculous with wheel effects. Anything that allows you to discard any number of cards and then draw that many cards, well, suddenly you just lava axe your opponent. You probably feel pretty good about that. So like Elder Dragon War or anything like that in Standard, I feel like we've got like 6 of these effects is going to be amazing with this little dude. I just think it's a dangerous line of text one way or the other, and that counts for most formats, but do note that this thing is playable in Pauper, which I think is certainly worth noting, if nothing else. But, we get to Standard, then suddenly I think this thing can easily lava axe the opponent, like, once per turn if you're playing your cards right, literally. So I wouldn't be surprised to see this thing pop up, at least in a brew or two. But speaking of 1 damage here, 1 damage there, you know how much I like those effects. So let's get into the top 3 and look at Packdoll Terror. This is 4 mana, kind of sounds like a lot, but bear with me here. 3 and a black for a 3/4 artifact creature with a ridiculous line of text by my estimation. Whenever that's kind of neat, or another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, drain your opponent for 1. Now, I will again say, because you're already saying it, this costs like too much mana, right? This costs 4 mana, so you have to wait until later on in the game to even get this out, and then it can start doing stuff, and is it too late by then? Well, I will say the same thing that I said about Thopter Fabricator. This is more or less unkillable by most spells that we have in Standard, at least in black, where, things like, again, Nowhere to Run, Virtue Persistence aren't going to kill it, Cut Down's not going to kill it, Go for the Throat's not going to kill it, and in this case, Anoint with Affliction won't even kill it. So if you're playing against black, they're going to have a very hard time actually doing anything about this thing. It's a monstrosity. It looks like that thing that Sid makes in Toy Story, the like baby doll with the spider body. It's what it reminds me of anyway, and it's kind of freaking me out. It just ain't that hard to dump a bunch of artifacts on the table, even in Standard, but this card is in my top 3 because it's playable in so many formats, not just Standard where I want to try to mess around with it. I don't know, maybe it does something there, but it too is Pauper playable. And I think in some ways that is even better than looking at a card like, Magmakin Artillerist, even though that card looks really good in Pauper. There's already an affinity deck in Pauper. This could slot directly into, although we'll have to wait and see about that. But obviously, too, I gotta say the C word, Commander. The card looks really, really good in Commander, where if you set this thing up with a little bit of hopefully extra time that you might have in a format like that, and suddenly you untap with it and everyone dies. It seems kind of unbelievable. It isn't each opponent effect, so you got that going for you in that format. I just feel like it's a pretty dangerous card there if you untap with it and resolve, 2-3 artifacts, or maybe a Marionette Master or something like that, and just things go absolutely nutso. So card looks great in multiple formats to me. Again, I'm not too sure it's going to make the cut in Standard, but I'm going to darn sure try. Darn sure. It's a family channel, you can tell. Now, my number 2 is it's honestly kind of boring, but I do think the card is that good, and I think that nobody is paying any attention to its existence. So let's talk about Sky Crash for just a second. This is literally just Shatter. It's just the card Shatter, but they gave it cycling for a single red. Now, I also want to kind of bring up Locust Spray here as a kind of honorable mention for a card like this. -1/-1, and a single black mana to cycle. That could actually be pretty dope, but I think Sky Crash barely edges it out here, especially going into Aetherdrift Standard, where there will probably be a few more problem artifacts to take out just because of all the vehicles. Not to mention the Gear Hulks are incidentally artifacts. You're probably going to be seeing a couple of those. We already had artifacts in Standard to worry about, like Simulacrum Synthesizer and more likely Urbrass Forge and a couple of other things that you might have to deal with. So I think just being able to play, a one-of main deck Shatter effect that you can cycle away if you don't really have a target for it is actually more powerful than it looks. It's a pretty easy card to miss, and even if you do see it, it's pretty easy to just be like, nah, whatever. But I actually do think this is a really main deckable piece for some red decks in Standard. But let's move on to my number 1 here, and I wish I had more to say about it, but I think this is just self-evidently a powerful card, and I'm surprised that more people aren't bringing it up. Let's take a look at Memory Guardian. This is 5 mana for a 3/4 flyer, which sounds like a lot, but here's the deal. It's got affinity for artifacts, so you'll very likely just be paying a single blue mana or maybe 2 mana for your 3/4 flyer, and I think that that is just short of broken. Affinity, back in the day, played a creature like this that was technically worse. I think it may have cost a mana more, and it was a 3/2 flyer, whereas this is a 3/4 flyer, meaning, again, just like some of the other things I've talked about, it's an artifact creature that doesn't die to Go for the Throat, doesn't die to -3 toughness effects in black. That's important. It won't die to Elspeth Smite either. That's important. It'll never die to Torch the Tower. That's important. There's just not really much. It kills this. Again, Anoint with Affliction doesn't kill it. Cut Down doesn't kill it. It is really tough to actually smash this card in Standard with most of the removal that's being played. And in the meantime, the between time, it is a flyer. It's actually kind of heftier than most of the flyers in Standard. This cruises directly through Spyglass Sirens and Fairy Masterminds and all kinds of other stuff. If only we had artifact lands in Standard, man, but not quite. Either way, I do think this is fairly easy to get on the table blindingly fast, and having, multiple 3/4 flyers on the table by turn 3 ready to strike is going to be, I think, something kind of tough for some decks to get over. This could go in that winter deck. This goes pretty well with that new 1 mana -2/2 artifact that we just got. Grim Bauble, that's the name of it. That card is amazing. It's going to be on the main list, don't worry, but it goes pretty well with that and a ton of other stuff, like a Spyglass Siren even, in Standard right now. I just could easily see a blue-black artifact deck coming together with the aforementioned Demonic Junker. This and Demonic Junker together look like a great couple of finishing maneuvers. Top rope elbow drops in a deck like Standard Dimir Affinity, and I really think that this could be like the secret to carrying that deck. But that is all of my picks for this season. Let me know what you've got brewing down there in the comments section. You got any sleepers I didn't bring up? Let me know. But our next video, my freaking voice will cooperate, is going to be the top 25 cards in Aetherdrift. So if you think a card might not be getting enough attention, it could actually be on my main list. But I still want to know what you think. Apart from that, do all the YouTube stuff. Hit the button shaped like a thumb. Subscribe to the channel. I need some more subscribers. I always need more of those. But apart from that, you can obviously check out the Patreon if you want to help out around here. Just $1 a month, and there's still plenty of time to vote on the first deck of Aetherdrift Standard and beyond for that matter. But also, I guess you could leave a tip in the comment section. I lived off tip for 10 years as a server and 5 years as a pizza delivery driver. I am certainly not too good for tips. So if you want to help out and you don't want to do all the Patreon stuff, that's fine. You can leave a tip in the comments section. But I'm just glad that you're here all the way up to this part of the video and haven't clicked away despite my extremely Muppet-like annoying voice in this particular era of the channel. Don't worry, I'll be back to my smooth, dulcet tones soon, hopefully. God, I hope. But anyway, for your sake, much less mine. But anyway, that's all I've got for this one, guys. Just let me know how you felt about it in the comments, and I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love, and be kind.